All right, good evening. I now call to order the Tuesday, October 8th, 2024 meeting of the Sugar Land Planning and Zoning Commission. Welcome to all the commissioners, staff, and those watching at home. We'll turn to item 2, public comment, and we'll entertain anyone. Is there anyone signed up to offer public comment?
No, Chair, there is not.
And is there anyone in attendance this evening that would like to make public comment? Seeing none, we'll close that portion of the meeting and move on to item 3, which is minutes, consideration of and action on the minutes of the September 26th, 2024 meeting. Members, the minutes are in your packet. Any changes or comments?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Commissioner Brown. Can I get a second? Second by Commissioner Smith, and we'll vote at this time. We'll do a hand vote at this time. Everyone present is voting in the affirmative, and so the motion passes unanimously. All right, with that, we'll move on to item 4, subdivision plat, consideration of and action on Monet Estates final plat with Jessica.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm going to let Jessica do a little plat overview first, and then we'll get into the final plat.
Great.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. It's been a while since you've probably had to look at a plat. I think the most recent thing that you'd approved maybe was a plat extension back in April. So just going to go over some of those basics. Subdivision platting is based in public law from Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 212. It gives that governing body the ability to protect the health, safety, and public welfare, and also the orderly development of lands, which also includes cities' ETJs. Public law with subdivision platting differs from zoning law. Zoning law is very broad in how we can make those interpretations, whereas platting laws are very, they're more narrow, and they're just an administrative authority. You may hear from time to time different words of subdivision, platting, subdivision, plat. What does it all mean? They don't mean the same. Subdivision is just a subdivision of property. So if I own 2 acres and I want to sell property to you and I want to sell you that 1 acre, it's just a division of land. A plat is not a subdivision of property. A plat is real property that's being subdivided and is approved by the governing authority. And that subdivision plat is that paper or that Mylar that you get that has everything like your lots, your reserves, your blocks, and that gets approved by you and then gets recorded with public records. Requirements that we look at when we bring a plat for recommendation for approval is that it's satisfying procedural as well as substantive requirements. Those requirements are housed in the Land Development Code in Chapter 5, as well as our Development Application Handbook. Examples of things that are procedural are: you've submitted an application, you pay fees. Approval by the governing body or approval that has been granted to the administration for that approval. Substantive things that we look at may be like lot dimensions, meets and bounds descriptions, correct owner's certifications, and lien holder information on that. And then once we have that information, we're able to bring a recommendation to you. So based on these requirements, it's ministerial in nature. Sure, we may have questions, but it either meets our code or it doesn't meet our code. And with that, I'm going to hand over the presentation for Monet Estates to Ms. Jessica Eccles.
So this may look familiar. This is the final plat for Monet Estates. As a refresher, the preliminary plat was approved with conditions last year on November 14th. The development consists of single-family residential lots and is approximately 6 acres located in the city's ETJ at the corner of University Boulevard and Cabrera Drive. It is 32 urban patio lots with 5 reserves and 2 blocks, and it is proposed to be a gated community with access being provided via a private access easement with 2 access points to Cabrera Drive. Again, the preliminary plat was approved last year, and it was approved with the condition that the labels for curves C24 through C31 and lines L14 through 16 be shown in the same direction as curve 23. Those labels were in that southeastern portion of the plat boundary. And those labels have been updated with the final plat, and the final plat has been reviewed for compliance with Chapter 5 of the Land Development Code, Development Application Handbook, the Riverstone General Land Plan, and the Riverstone Development Agreement. As a refresher, too, House Bill 3167 was passed in 2019, which gives the Commission 3 options when reviewing plats. The Commission may approve with conditions, or disapprove with an explanation, but the Commission must cite a code requirement for conditions of approval or for code reasons for disapproval. A plotting guide has been provided in the agenda packet to help group key requirements for plats with the code references. And with that, staff recommends approval of the proposed Monet Estates final plat. And we're available for any questions, and the applicant is also present to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. We'll go down the line here. Commissioner Hallberg, any comments, questions? Very good. Commissioner Smith? None for me. Commissioner Parikh? Pressure's on. Commissioner Brown?
No, just thank you for making those changes we went over last year, so no other comments.
Very good. If there are no other comments from the commission, I will move to make a motion to recommend approval on the final subdivision plat to the mayor and city council. Can I get a second?
A second.
Second from Commissioner Parikh, and we'll vote at this time. And that passes unanimously among members present. All right. Oh, you can't get in. You snuck in on me there. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, we're both here. All right. Can I just get clarification in terms of presentation? Like, do you all still, are they able to vote if they weren't? I apologize. I don't know when you actually sat down.
I think she just walked in after it was already.
After it's, so is that that's the view of the
I was here during the minutes.
She came right after the call to order.
I voted on the minutes.
okay.
Did you vote on the?
And that was a hand vote anyway.
Yeah.
You're saying that you were not logged in to register your vote on the plat.
I can't log in.
Got it. Okay.
We did a hand vote. I did a hand vote both times. We did a hand vote on both.
Both times. Okay. And it passed unanimously among members present. Very good. And now I'll recognize that Commissioner Dawu is here as well. So thank you. Thank you for being here. All right. With that, we'll move on to item 5. And commissioners, we're going to do this in 2 sections as usual. We're going to have a public hearing. We're going to open the hearing, close the hearing, and at that point, we'll hear from staff and then move on to consideration and action of on the item. So at this time, I will open the public hearing and receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed amendments to Chapter 2 and Chapter 4 of the Land Development Code, establishing an industrial sign overlay district for certain restricted light industrial zoned and rezoning light industrial district M1 to light industrial district M1. Industrial sign overlay district, properties directly abutting the railroad right-of-way along US 90 between Derry Ashford East, Eldridge Parkway West, and adding development regulations applicable to the ISOD-90A district. With that, I will, is there anyone signed up for public comment on this item?
Chair,
Yes.
we typically have staff presentation and then open the item for
Okay.
public hearing. I'm not going to make you read all
Please.
of that again.
You should have interjected.
I know, I did. It was so eloquent, and I didn't want to disrupt you. But typically, we have the staff presentation first, so that way anybody that is joining us in the audience has the benefit of getting the presentation.
Okay.
And then we can formally open, or we will then move into the public hearing
do
part
that.
of it. Yep, thanks.
Okay. In that case, Jessica, you're up, right?
Yes, sir, I am. So I'll give you some background on the sign overlay district. The city was approached by for a proposed plan for a redesign for an existing monument sign by a local business. That redesign did not fit within the regulations of Chapter 4 for the monument sign, despite that sign being shorter in height. Staff took this opportunity to re-examine and look if there were any unique circumstances involved on the properties with the M1 district. And from there, City Council passed a resolution that directed staff to establish a sign overlay district. That has brought you forward here for development code amendments as well as an initiated rezoning by staff for properties. These properties are zoned M1. They abut the Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way on 90A, and it's located between Eldridge Road on the west and Derry Ashford Road on the east with the map that's depicted above. So what we're doing with the proposition is establishing the Industrial Sign Overlay District 90A, which is ISOD, in Chapter 2. And with that, we are defining what's the purpose and we're defining the boundaries of that district. In Chapter 4, we're adding the development regulations, and Chapter 4 is our sign regulations. So we're putting in there the maximum height, effective area, setbacks, et cetera. At the same time, we're looking to rezone properties that are zone M1 between Eldridge and Derry Ashford to industrial district with the sign overlay, and those for the properties that are abutting the Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way. The proposal for the overlay district extends 200 feet in depth on those properties. So as you can see with the proposition that we have before you, right now, when those same properties, you would only be allowed a maximum 6-foot monument sign in height. And when I go over what we're proposing, I'll kind of illustrate what that means as far as visibility. So with the ISOD 98 overlay district, we're proposing a maximum height of 35 feet. It's 35 feet, but it needs to understand that there's probably approximately about 150 feet from 90A to the property lines of these properties that are zoned M1. So that doesn't take into account setbacks that you would have from that property line. So due to that distance, when you're on 90A, it reduces the visible impact of something that would be possibly 35 feet in height. We've also taken into account what that visibility would do if you're on, let's say, Eldridge or you're on Gillingham with having a setback. So we've recognized and proposed minimum setbacks of 150 feet from those property lines. So that's going to be from your property line that you have with the Union Pacific Railroad property, and then 20 feet from the other streets that we have. We have a maximum effective sign area of 100 square feet, and then it's one of these monument signs is allowed per 500 feet of frontage. So the signs are going to be set back to reduce that visibility of the impact of it, as well as not allowing a proliferation of those signs with one for every 500 feet. The overlay district is really meant to account for those industrial districts that we have in that kind of industrial district park that we have in the city. This is a map of the proposed overlay that shows from Derry Ashford over to Eldridge with those M1 properties at 200 feet. This is also in support of the land use plan, the goals and policies with goal 4B as well as goal 9, which 4B is saying is a great place for business, and then goal 9 is fostering redevelopment. All the requirements for tonight's public hearing notice have been met with mailers sent within 200 feet of the property, published notification in the newspaper, as well as published notification on the website. At this time, staff is not aware of any opposition and hasn't received any opposition. The recommendation tonight is for you to hold a public hearing, followed by a consideration and action. Staff supports a recommendation for approval to the mayor and the city council for the amendments to the development code as well as the rezoning. Next steps in this is for city council to hold a public hearing and consideration and action of the ordinance on October 15th. I am here to answer any clarifying questions that you may have. Thank you.
Do you want to open the public hearing first, close it, and then do questions? Great. In that case, I will open the public hearing on the agenda item as presented. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Signed up to speak?
No, Chair, there is not.
Great. And anyone joining us tonight wishing to speak or address the commission? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment at this time. Commissioners, questions? We'll go around the horn. Commissioner Halbert? Commissioner Patel? Commissioner Dawu?
So these signs, this amendment and ordinance, this is only along the industrial district, right?
It only applies to the M1 properties in that location. Yes, ma'am.
There's no residence planned, or is there any plan to convert this into a residential use or a commercial use down the road? Or if an application comes in, say somebody buys out this an industry, right? Mm-hmm. Or a land, and they want to convert it into a commercial use. So now you have a 35-foot sign in front of a potential townhome or something.
I'm trying to follow what you said. So if you had maybe an industrial property that then got rezoned to residential, and there could be a possible...
Or a commercial, right? And somebody wants to develop, but now you have this permission in place, where, you know, whoever owns this sign can do a 35-foot sign.
Not if the property was zoned commercially. It would have to be zoned industrial. So if you had an instance where you had an M1 property that was maybe then rezoned to B2 and the sign was existing, you're correct. The sign would stay there if somebody put a 35-foot sign. Now, if something were to happen that it would be altered with nonconformity, you wouldn't be able to do anything with it. It would have to stay as is, and you could probably just, you know, change lettering or sign face on it. But it's pretty restrictive on how you could do something with a non-conforming sign. Also, specifically in this area, I don't want to never say never, but this is, you know, our business park. These are industrial zone properties, and I don't know that staff would make a recommendation to change that otherwise, since we want to recognize this area for what it is. But it would only apply to M1 properties.
What is the current highest height of an industrial building in that zone? Do we know that a certain building was that looked at?
To my knowledge, I think the tallest one we have is about 29 feet.
So the sign is going to be taller than that.
There could be an allowance for 35, yes, ma'am. So 6 feet difference.
And when you say it's 1 per 500 feet, right?
Yes, ma'am.
What is the speed limit on that road?
The speed limit on that portion of 98 is 50 miles an hour.
At 50 miles an hour, what is the TxDOT setback for driveways?
A setback for a drive or driveway distances?
Center to center driveway distance.
I do not know I don't know offhand what's the distance between driveways on TxDOT, but it is according to the speed limit.
Yes.
I don't know offhand. I'm sure it's probably over 100 feet. I don't think it's anything like 75 feet, but
I think it's much more than that.
it may be.
But that was not investigated what the center to center driveway could be, because a lot of times these signs are depicting a certain business, right? Mm-hmm. And access to that business, and then to be closer to that access, so you know where to go.
So in this case with these properties, you're not going to see any driveways that are going to happen from 98 because of the railroad. That's just not going to happen. I think the crossings we have are all the crossings that Union Pacific would probably allow. More or less, you may be seeing a driveway or some sort of like curb cut that could happen possibly on Gillingham or Eldridge on one of the city streets where we do have those distancing requirements. We don't look at it according to speed limits. We look at it according to the type of road classification that it is. And in those instances, it would be set back a minimum of 20 feet on those roads, so you wouldn't have any sight visibility issues when you're in a car. I do think that if you're maybe concerned visually, like what that impact is going to be, I believe that the city has some monument signs that are out there, I think on Derry Ashford, and those were put out by the city, and I think those are about 20 feet in height and maybe set back like 15 feet or so. So that's what you could potentially have on those streets, although I think those are set a little bit like closer. They're not as like far back from 90A, but yeah, the visual impact isn't, I drove on 90A and, you know, just seeing what it looked like. And I too, at first, you know, when I was like thinking about this, like this could be high, but I think just at that speed limit from 90A, I don't think you're getting that impact. And then by limiting those for 1 per 500 feet, you're not gonna see that many out there.
Okay, I may have further questions. I'm going to reserve that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. What I'd like to know is what's driving the change. I mean, Sugar Land has had, you know, the signage regulations, and I think that's sort of been a part of the you know, the beauty of the city of not having all of these, you know, billboards and signs and having this all regulated. So why is it that we're having to make this change and such a drastic change in the height of the signs?
We're trying to recognize that this area is a little bit different. I would say that this step forward with the overlay district is probably like a first step of what we want to recognize in the area. I think as time goes on, we've had internal conversations. We've had internal conversations with staff about some difficulties that we've probably had with signs in the business park, that we do have to work with the Property Owners Association. So it's things that we're hearing from those property owners where I think this, like I said, this is the first step, but we may probably be looking at it holistically within the business park, and then possibly looking at it just on the 90A corridor due to those speed limits, because we allow for a taller monument sign height on 59 on the feeder road. And when you think about the feeder road, it's maybe even less of a speed limit or about the same speed limit that you're going on 90A. So just having a little bit of that visibility, but then also the setback from the railroad. I'll tell you, the setback from the railroad is really, I think, the impetus to say we can have something with that height. But it's things that we're hearing from the business community. And one of the goals of the city council is redevelopment. And then we also have our business retention. So we're trying to listen to our business owners and provide some flexibility within our code.
Yeah, but I don't see, I mean, we've got a lot of businesses, right? You know, and it's, you know, you go down towards Costco. I mean, none of these signs, I mean, you're driving at that speed maybe on the freeway and you can still see those signs. I mean, I think, you know, that what you mentioned is that this maximum height would be higher than any building we do have. So I don't understand why a business would think that they need something with that height. I mean, this is a big jump from like a normal of what we have is 10 feet and then going to 35.
Agree. And I do, like I said, I'm going through this exercise and seeing what was appropriate and not appropriate. I do think, and I'm going to call the railroad a barrier. I think that barrier between the railroad's property and 90A, it just softens it so much more than when you're passing by Costco and you're on that feeder road and it's there, right? You have both like your speed, that's going on the feeder road, but on 90A, you have the speed and the distance.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just not, I'm not there.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Parikh?
Yeah, just a quick confirmation, and I think my colleague asked in a similar vein, but we're not adding any uses or changing any existing uses of
No.
what's already there, correct?
No, sir, we are
Just
not.
adding a district for this specific, overlay district for this specific square footage. What's the precedence for us doing this in other areas? If you can kind of just jog my memory a little bit. I think we've done something similar, but
You've done an overlay district, but that was with the alcohol overlay
that was right
district,
here.
but that was specific with land
Yeah.
uses, where we added that. This is, like you said, we're not looking at land uses, we're not looking to change land uses. It's just simply putting regulations in Chapter 4 for this overlay district that's being created.
okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Commissioner Brown?
Got a lot of questions.
Sure.
What kind of signs?
Monument signs only.
These are monument signs.
Yes, sir.
So there'll be 35-foot monument signs.
Yes, sir.
If it's a 35-foot tall monument sign and it's 3 feet wide, you've hit your 100 square foot requirement. It doesn't make sense. How are you going to have a 3-foot wide sign, 35 foot high, that's going to advertise anything, that's going to tell a story? Is it vertical lettering? Does it say Costco?
We actually didn't give any minimum width of those signs.
But you have, because you said the maximum square footage of that sign can be 100 feet. The math can only occur one way. It's 35 by something. So if you're telling me it's 100 square feet, it's 35 by less than 3 feet, actually, to get to that. So I think sign is poorly defined, because you've asked us to, it doesn't say monument sign in here. So I think that needs to be cleaned up some. Secondly, if you're looking at 100 square feet and it's 35 feet high, it doesn't make sense that we're approving a sign that's 3 feet wide. I think that needs to be revisited in some form. I think you got to go back and look at your math and how many square feet you can cover. Do you disagree?
I don't disagree. I went through just different iterations of how large that message could be on the sign. I came up and determined this was adequate because we weren't defining what that width could be.
But if it's going to be 35 feet high max,
But it doesn't have to be. I see what
Right,
you're
but
saying. If someone's
yeah.
maxing it out, you can only do 3
But that is
feet.
that's what it's kind of going after here, is the maximum height of 35 feet. So the reality of it is, it would bring down the overall height of the sign of someone. But if it's 10 feet in width in the message, it's going to be a much shorter sign, right?
So with that mathematical calculation, yes, I'm going to get a
It's 10
tall
feet high.
sign, but I'm not going to get this monolith sign that's 35
doesn't-
by 10.
I get it, but doesn't that go against what you're attempting to do and to give these businesses the visibility they're looking for? If you look at the edge of the roadbed and you look at where the other side of Schlumberger Drive is, I went and looked at it. It's 217 feet from the edge of the road. And for you to make anything that's readable at 50 miles an hour at that distance, and particularly as Farina said, these things are placed to drive people into driveways. But that's not the case here, because you've got to hit that road, or you have to come down Schlumberger Drive, which in some places I don't believe is a complete road. Part of it is blocked off in there as you get closer to I can't think of the name of the street, there in front of the animal shelter. But I think we need to define that. I think if you're looking at the messaging, because if I'm a business and I want to put a sign up, I want to put my logo on there. I want to put the name of my business on there. And if it's Bob's Burgers and I need 10 feet, the sign's not going to go higher than 10 feet. And if the sign's going to be 10 feet high and it's 217 feet over there, is that accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish for the developers on this property? And I think some thought needs to be given to that. So that's my input on this. The other item I want to talk about is, what about the other side of Highway 90? The businesses that are existing today, is there going to be any change for those, or it doesn't appear to be on this map, and is that going to cause, does the city have any concern that those business owners on the south side of Highway 90 are going to have any heartburn over the fact that, because if you look at it, they're all 6-foot monuments. They're very short, they may not even be that tall.
There's 6 probably.
Yeah, but any concern there from those businesses?
Oh, yes, definitely. Right now, like I said, this was the first step in looking at this, just with the M1 properties. It's something through our planning and scheduling of things that we want to bring to you and to the city council is looking at the 98 corridor, like I mentioned, with the speed limits that we have. I think a monument height at 6 feet is probably not doing it necessarily for visibility on that roadway. Is it 10? That I don't know, because I haven't gone through that, but I don't think we're like necessarily getting there. So we're definitely not turning away from the other businesses that are on 90A or the rest of the business park, really.
And then if you can have one every 500 feet, is it first come, first serve? Or how is that going to be handled today?
So it's within that property, right? So if you've just, if you've got 600 feet of property out there, you can only have one. If you don't have 500 feet of property, you can't get one. So the idea really is it's industrial property, some of those larger properties, and with the setback. And I do respect your comment about the effective area of the sign. And I would ask, what would your recommendation be? It looks like there's a lot of thought that was put in that, so I would love to just kind of hear your comment on that.
I just think that, you guys know the sign ordinance better than I do. I didn't go pull it, but I think that, you need to give some consideration in terms of coming back with a better defined, what a definition of a sign is in square footage. Because if you're looking at if it's a singular business and it's going to be Bob's Burgers, you could put a 5-foot sign, a 5 by 20-foot sign on a pole and take it up 35 feet, and that's effective. But if you're doing a monument sign, it's a different deal. So that's why I'm just saying, how do you define that? And I think the city needs to define what they want in terms of a monument sign, or what the definition of a sign is.
I don't have chapter 4 in front of me, but I know we do have definitions specifically. In reference to what you're saying, I think we do define a sign. Well, most certainly we probably do. But that's something that I can check if you have that concern. Honestly, going back to, what you said, because we weren't limiting the width of that sign, it was my opinion that we were kind of giving the ability for that design, and if there was a logo and what that message was going to be on it, with having a message, but it also not being too intrusive.
Right.
This is still Sugarland.
I know, but I'm just saying, you're telling someone you can have and I'm beating this horse to death, and I'm really sorry, but you can have a 35-foot sign. That's great, and until you realize you can only have 100 square feet, not so great. So I don't know how you can better define that, but I think that needs to be looked at.
Anything else, Commissioner Brown?
I'm good.
Please.
Just a follow-up. What is the total length of this hatched area that is being redefined, that overlay district? What is the total length along 90?
From Eldridge to Derry Ashford, I don't know offhand. I don't know.
Because that would help me understand how many signs can go up.
Well, it's per property, right? It's not one for every 500 for that whole length. It's per property. That's M1, and I think there might be 2 properties that qualify that have the frontage that it would work with, that have just that width and that presence on 90, I guess I should say.
So these 2 properties that would qualify for this, having that tall sign, are these destination properties or impulse? If it's Bob's Burger, if I can borrow that term, then it's an impulse. I'm going down, I see Bob's Burger, I think I want to stop and get one. But it's not an impulse because it's a business, right? M1 district, it's a destination. Either I want to go there, I don't want to go there. So having this sign, what does it do for these businesses? What kind of businesses are these?
they're industrial businesses, you're right. These aren't destinations that I'm looking for a place to eat or I'm looking for a place to shop. I think it allows them to have presence on the 90A corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add, really, Jessica covered it, but essentially these are employment places. They're not your impulse retail. I need to buy something and pull in right here because I see it's convenient. These are destinations where employees are going to, other businesses are going to support and conduct business activities. The other thing I guess I would say from a standpoint of some of the, I guess, if you wanted to do a very tall and skinny, it would be more from a branding standpoint. You're branding your business, you're branding your corporation and your company versus advertising, you know, again, more like a retail kind of type setting does.
So does that now leave the sign ordinance up to interpretation for each user? Isn't the idea in Sugar Land to have a uniform sign code? If you're telling this business, you could have a 3 by 30 foot sign, 35 foot sign, but 500 feet down the road, that sign may be a 10 by 10.
Sure, right. And again, this area, the maximum height would be 6 feet. So again, trying to provide some flexibility and for larger properties that have presence along 90A.
And I'm in favor of that. Is the ordinance better suited to say that instead of looking at this 35 foot by 3 foot, that we come back and say, you can have a monument sign that's up to 10 feet high and 10 feet wide? Is that a better look, and does that align more with like Commissioner Smith was talking about that Sugar Land look?
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that because I think even the way all of there's a maximum. There isn't like, it must be a this by this. It is a maximum height, a maximum effective area. So there's still the ability to, if for whatever reason you want to do something a little different. The other thing I would also offer in a lot of parts of our city, we also have HOAs or more property owner associations that are probably also dictating more of the uniformity standpoint for signage for whether it's a district, a set of properties or things like that that they manage. So the code, the way it's written, there's still, even now, it's not a prescriptive must be within, you know, this style or type. There is still the opportunity to maybe be a little bit more narrow, but go up to this height versus being very uniform. So, yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. So I have a couple questions, Jessica. And I'm gonna try to summarize some of my fellow commissioners' comments. I'd like to hone in on, I believe it was Commissioner Brown mentioned so if there's two properties that are in this parcel, the assumption is that each one of them gets a sign if they so choose. I think a couple things. One, we need to know with some certainty how many properties there are. And I think that should be depicted in anything that's presented to us so that we can have that information at hand. And in the event that it's more than two, I think that there needs to be a defined way of awarding who goes first, right? If an overlay district goes into place, is it the knowledge of the property owner, you know, paying attention to what's going on at the commission and city council that they kind of get first in line? So I think that's a very legitimate point here. So let's define the properties. Let's define how the applicants would potentially get in line to move forward on a project or on a sign. The other is a question in specific to the business park. At the corner of, or at the intersection of Derry Ashford and 90, there are red signs that signal the entrance to the business park. Do you know the height of those signs?
1 second.
and I'm calling them signs, they're really ornamental, yeah.
They are, one I think is 40 feet and one is 22 feet. So one's taller than the other. So the one that is just a tall, I would say, monument sign or column sign is 40. And the other one is like a column with kind of like L-shaped. So that one reaches, so I said 22. Sorry. My brain forgot already.
20, but let's call it 22, somewhere in that neighborhood. Feedback from me in my individual personal capacity as a commissioner is that I think I can't picture the 40-foot in my own mind right now, but I would think that something more in line with the 22, 25-foot creates some degree of uniformity in the proposed district. And I would ask that staff consider that as feedback from the commission on as we move forward. And then there were other concerns. Let's capture those in the minutes and in an explicit fashion so that feedback can be reconciled before this item comes back to us on the 24th, because I would like to move to table the item for the evening and move on to item 6, reports. Can I get a second to that?
Second.
Thanks. No need to vote. All right, with that, we'll move to item 6, reports, Planning and Zoning Commission liaison reports for the October 1 meeting. Any,
I have it.
sorry, you had it, Mary? Good.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There wasn't anything on the agenda for specific to P&Z. It was a consent agenda for the most part.
Great. Item 6B, city staff report. Lisa, Jessica? Going once, going twice?
I was looking up the number of properties along that area. This is only a handful. But sounds like we will be back for the 24th.
Yes.
But between then and, or I guess now and then, there is a conference that we will be attending. So I will be sending out information to those that are attending, which I believe is all of you. Just kind of finalizing all the details and some of the things that are lined up for the conference. It should be really good. Excited to see what Allen, Texas has to offer in terms of redevelopment and other development activity. So look forward to seeing you all there. And that is the end of my report.
Very good. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Can I get a second? I have a second, and we are adjourned. Thank you.